fleeting impressions half seen through a wall composed of darkness and pain, dim consciousness of being in a ship and of landing, of someone spooning broth into him, of being carried on a stretcher with rain on the blankets, of a stone-walled room, of different faces, of whispered conversations, of another stretcher, of another plane, and a pain in his arm. He sank back down into darkness. He thought he was in the drone again. His eyes opened. He saw Dunedin's face. He must still be in the sea, but no, he wasn't cold, he was warm. He's coming around, said someone softly. He'll be able to operate soon. He opened his eyes and saw boots and kilts. Oh my God, there's transvestites. A lot of boots and kilts standing beside. What was he lying on? A plane's motors? He was on a plane. He turned his head a little and it hurt. But there was Dunedin's face. Johnny saw that he was on some sort of table. He was in a plane, a passenger plane. There was a tall grey man in a white coat on his left side. There were a lot of older Scots on his right side. 4 young Scots were sitting on a bench. There was another table with some shiny things on it. Somewhere beyond the doctor. Dunedin was sitting beside him, and there was a tube with a sort of pump connecting Dunedin's arm with his own. What's this? It's a blood transfusion. He felt he should be very careful about what he said, and well, he was smiling, but he was worried and he did feel bad, keeping a bright face on it. Laddie, you are singularly fortunate. You are getting the royal blood of the Stuarts, no less, which puts you in direct line, after me, of course, to the throne of Scotland. The doctor was saying to Dunedin to take it easy, and we all knew that Johnny might die. There wasn't a 30% chance for his recovery, but not with those 2 severe skull fractures and all the other injuries as well, and the shock combined. His respiration was too shallow. In the underground hospital where they had operated for centuries, in a land where skull injuries were common, and the doctor had seen too many die in a less injured condition than this one. He was looking down at the big, handsome lad with something akin to pity. This is Dr. McKendrick, said Dunedin to Johnny. Take a hand, oh, you're right. You always overdo things, Johnny. Most of you content with just the 1 skull fracture, but oh no, laddie, you got to have 2. Dunedin was smiling in an uncertain way. That you'll be right as rain in no time. He wished he could believe it. He really did. Johnny's face bore the grey of death. Maybe I should have just waited for you in the drone, if you were that close. The older Scots let out an incredulous gasp. Chief of Clanfergus stepped forward. No, not time of the fouling crashed. Just a mile north of Cape Wrath. 'Twas almost upon us. How did you find me? Laddie, when you set up a fire beacon like that to gather the clans, you don't do it but halfway. The drone went up to 10,000 feet like a flaming rocket and left to have it lit up the whole of Scotland. That's how we spotted you. The chief of the Argylls grumbled. That wasn't what your companion told us, Dunedin. They said you were watching a caught detecting a small object in the water, and that's how you took the plane and saw the fire. Dunedin was very composed. It makes a better story the way that's the way the story will write it. He lit a beacon fire in the sky. The other chiefs nodded firmly. That was the way it should be. Don't bother the facts, just talk bollocks. What day is this? Day 95! Johnny felt a bit confused. He had lost a day, 2 days. Where had he been? Where? Why? The doctor he saw the puzzlement. He had seen it before with head injuries. This young man had lost track of time. They had to wait for me, he said. I was not in Aberdeen at the moment, and then we had your type of blood. We had to find someone with the same type. I'm sorry it took so long, but we also had to bring you out of shock. Get you warm. He was shaking his head sadly. I should have gone with you all along. I'll help the others when we get there. This upset John. I'm sorry for doing the Irish accent. For some reason, my brain won't let me do Scottish. I must think transvestite, think transvestite, think transvestite. Da 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 da. Whee! Oh, fuck a haggles. That's a bit better. Were there a lot of Scots hurt? You shouldn't have delayed for me if you had a doctor. No, said the chief full of commands. Dr. Allen wasn't no expert with burns. He was sent 2 days ago. 21 hurt, said Dunedin. The one being you, of course. Only 2 died. Very light casualties. The others will all recover. Who are they? He tried to make a hand with his motion towards the 4 men on the bench. Why, those, said Dunedin, are the other 4 members of the World Federation for the Unification of the Human Race. The first one is the MacDonald, And he speaks Russian now. The second is an Argyle, and he speaks German. That wasn't why they were there at all. They were the other they'd found with Johnny's blood type, waiting just in case more transfusions were needed. Why am I in a plane? That was a question they didn't want to answer. The doctor had told them not to worry this young man. They had had him in a plane and were rushing him to the huge underground defense base in the mountains. There was still some chance of a siloed counterattack. They had no idea at all whether the bomb sent to Silo had succeeded or failed. The Shanker brothers had told them about the force screen on Silo's transshipment area, and that the early recoil had shown evidence of the screen's closing. The Chamkos had also told them that, well, it was common salt would neutralize the kill gas completely. Angus had gotten Angus had gotten the mine ventilation fans into the old base, and they'd found salt for the filters of air. A group of excited, imported old Russians were at that very moment cleaning up their old base, and the parson was burying the dead there, and they were not about to leave Johnny McTyler anywhere but safe in that base. Donaldine answered, "What? Why not in the plane? You want to miss the victory celebrations? We can't be having that." As Scott, having Dwight up in the cockpit area, came back and whispered in Donaldine's ear. He was dragging a mic on a long cord, and they had it on the planetary band. Donaldine turned to Johnny. "Do you want to hear your voice so they can believe you're alive?" "Yeah, I really ought to stop doing the Irish accent. I want to try and go Virgil." "Who?" says Johnny. "The compound. The people. They just say something like, 'How are you?'" Donaldine put the mic very close to Johnny's mouth. "I'm fine," whispered Johnny. Then something told him he should try harder, and he tried to speak louder. "I am fine." Donaldine gave the mic back to the Scot, who hesitated, not sure the message had gone out, but Donaldine waved him away. "I can hear other planes." With a glance at the doctor for permission, Donaldine helped him turn his head, and Johnny looked out through the plane ports. There were 5 planes out there, stacked in a long echelon. He turned his eyes and looked at the other port. There were 5 planes out there in another echelon. "It's your escort." "My escort?" whispered Johnny. "But why? Everybody have." "Oi, laddie, but you're the one. You're the money one." "Yeah, Wurzel's much better." The doctor disconnected the tube. He felt Johnny's pulse. "My pulse is higher up." "I can't know, but we used to wear kilts." He nodded and motioned for the others to remain silent. He had let this go on for too long. The plane was not vibrating. The flight was very smooth. He had his patient out of shock. He just wished he were in his own operating cave. But the others would not leave this young man there, and he himself, having heard but a small part, could share the awe and respect for what he had done. "If you'll just drink this," said the doctor, "it will make things easier." Johnny held the cup. They held the cup to Johnny's mouth. It had whiskey and hypno in it, and some heavy herbs. He managed to drink it. Shortly the pain grew less, and he seemed to be floating and not notice the anal lube. The doctor signaled for them all to be quiet as he unzipped his coat. He's going to do a trepanning? He had a trepanning in his hand. The brain was being pressed upon in 3 places, not 2, and the pressure must be relieved. Donaldine went up to the cockpit to help Dwight. He glanced at their escort. Most of them were flying with one pilot. They had each smashed their mine sites and come hammering back here when he put out the call for a massive patrol to the north of Scotland. They all should have gone home, but they wouldn't hear of it. When they knew about Johnny, they had to be there. They'd gone down with the Scotch war party and gotten more planes from the Cornwall mine site after shooting the few silos staggering around, and those not ordered back for urgent duty had been sitting, waiting for news about Johnny. Now they were escorting him home. "You better tell them he's all right," said Dwight. "They keep calling in every 2 or 3 minutes for news, and so does Rob the Fox. Takes one man just to handle the radio." "He's all right," said Donaldine, and he looked down the long corridor to where the doctor had begun the operation. Dwight glanced at Donaldine. Was the young prince crying? What a bitch. He felt like doing it himself. Also a bitch. But then they do wear miniskirts. Johnny had been in a coma for 3 days. They had brought him to the ancient underground military base in the Rocky Mountains, where the salt filters could be dropped into place at once if a counterattack materialized from the planet silo. The hospital complex was very extensive. It was all white tile, hardly any of it was cracked. The Russians had cleaned it all up, and the parson had buried the crumbling dead. 15 of the wounded Scots were there, including 4 Anglican cannon. They were in a separate series of rooms from Johnny, but one could hear them now and again, especially when the pipe major gave them an afternoon concert. Kill the bastard piper. Dr. Allen and Dr. McKendrick had already discharged 5 of them as reasonably well, and certainly too restless and impatient to be kept idle when so many things were going on elsewhere. Chrissy had been in a constant attendance at Johnny's bedside, and she rose when Dr. McKendrick and Angus McTavish came in. They seemed angry with one another, and Chrissy hoped they would go soon. McKendrick put a hand on Johnny's forehead and just stood there for a moment, looking at his ashen pallor. Then he turned to Angus with an expressive hand that seemed to say, "See?" Johnny's breathing was still shallow. 3 days before Johnny had awakened and whispered to her to send for somebody, there was always a Scot guard at the door, his assault rifle blocking out any would-be visitors, of which there were far too many. Chrissy had brought him in and watched worriedly while Johnny whispered in a long message to Robert the Fox, and the guard got all on the picture recorder mic held close to Johnny's lips. The message had been to the effect that if another gas drone appeared in the sky, they could probably stop it with loading 30 recon drones on it with magnetic skids and racing the engine on reverse coordinates so the gas drone's motors would burn out. Chrissy didn't understand the message because she was blonde and female, but she did understand that it was too tiring for Johnny. He had lapsed back into a coma, and when the guard came back to say Sir Robert sent his thanks and would do that, Chrissy was quite cross with him. The same guard was on again when Dr. McKendrick and Angus were let in, and Chrissy avowed she would reason with him. McKendrick, yes. Angus, definitely no. McKendrick and Angus went out, and the guard closed the door behind them. "Look," said McKendrick, dragging Angus to one side from another. "Machines, machines, machines. This was once a very well appointed and outfitted hospital. Those big things over there, I haven't seen them in ancient but they were called X-ray machines. It was a subject called radiology." "Radiation," said Angus. "No, man, not on Daft, not on Johnny. Radiations for killing silos, you're daft. Those machines let you look inside the body and find out what is wrong. They were invaluable." "Those machines," said Angus angrily, "were run by electricity. Why do you think we light this place with mind lamps?" "You must get them running," said McKendrick. "Even if I did, I see by that one there that they have tubes. The gas in them tubes is over 1,000 years old. We can't have any more of it, and we couldn't get any tubes even if we had any. You're daft, man, you are." McKendrick glared at him. "There is something pressing on his brain. I just can't go in there plunging around with a scalpel. I can't guess, not with Johnny and McTaylor. People will slaughter me." "You just want to see inside his ass? Oh, well, why didn't you say so?" Angus went off muttering about electricity. "It's understand by pilot at the heliport they need to go to the compound fast. The pilots were very few and they were being run ragged. They were zipping off to all parts of the world. They had a sort of international airline going that was beginning to visit every remaining pocket of men on the planet, at least once per week. They were ferrying World Federation coordinators and chiefs and tribal leaders as fast as they could. More pilots were in training, but right now they only had 30 plus the 2 in hospital. So a casual request, even from a Scot, even from a member of the original combat force, was not likely to get much heed. Travel from the underground base to the compound was usually done by a ground car. Angus told him it had to do with Johnny, and the pilot said, "Why didn't you say so? Blonde, fit, 6'6". Oh my God!" Pushed him into a plane and said he would wait for him to come back. With grim purpose, Angus went to the compound section where they kept all the captive silos, a small area of the old dormitory level that had been rigged to circulate breathe gas, and unreconstructed silos were there under heavy guard. They numbered about 60 now, for occasional ones were brought in from distant mine sites when they were surrendering peacefully. Turrell was captive elsewhere. Angus got an air mask from the Scot guard and he let him in. The place was very dim and the huge silos sat around in attitudes of despair. One didn't walk into the place without being covered by the guard. The prisoners expected a silo counterattack, and they were none too cooperative. The Scot engineer located Kerr and dug him out of his apathy. He demanded of Kerr to tell him whether he knew any the mining equipment could be that could let one see inside solid objects. And Kerr shrugged. Angus told him who it was for, and Kerr sat there for a while, his amber eyes thoughtful. Then suddenly he wanted to be reassured as to who this was for. Angus told him, "It's for Johnny." Kerr was turning a tiny gold band around in his claws. Suddenly he sprang up and demanded that Angus give him an escort and a breathe mask. Kerr went down to the shops, and in a storeroom they dug out a strange machine. He explained it was used to analyze the internal structure of mineral samples and to find crystalline cracks inside the metals. He showed Angus how to work it. You put the examination tube under the object to be examined, and you read the results on the top screen. Easy. There was also a trace paper reader that showed metals and minerals and alloys, or any of the rocks. It worked on some wavelengths he called subproton field emanations, microwaves, and this was intensified by the lower tube, and then influence went through the sample and you could read it on the top screen. Being silo, of course, it was quite massive, but Kerr carried it for him to the waiting plane. A guard took Kerr back and Angus returned to the military base. They tried it with some cats they had that were cleaning out the rat population. Happy fat bastard cats. And the cats afterwards seemed cheerful enough, as long as you tickle their bellies. The screen showed the skull outline quite nicely. They tried it on one of the wounded Scots who volunteered, and they found a piece of stone in his hand from some mine injury. And he also seemed fine afterwards. By about 4 o'clock that afternoon, they had used it on Johnny. By 4:30, they had a three-dimensional picture and the trace paper. A very relieved Dr. McKendrick pointed out to Angus. "A piece of metal. See it? A sliver. Just a rather thin sliver. Just below one of the tree liver holes. Well, we're just getting ready, and I can have that out with a scalpel soon enough." "Metal. Scalpel. On Johnny." "No, you don't you dare touch him. I'll be right back." "And now he's Irish again, for fuck's sake. Must be all the spunk in the back of his throat from his father." With the metal trace paper flying behind him, Angus, 15 minutes later, charged in on the Chamcar brothers. They worked on a separate breathe gas dome at the compound, industriously trying to assist Robert the Fox to put things back together again. Angus showed the trace paper under the pug nose bones. "What metal is this?" Yeah, you can go cockney now. The Chamcos examined the trace squiggles. "Ferrous, damonite. A very strong support alloy." "Is it magnetic?" "Well, yeah, of course it is." By 6 o'clock, Angus was back in the hospital, and he had a heavy electro coil he had just made, and it had some hand grips on it. Angus showed McKendrick how to guide it, and McKendrick worked out the best path to bring the sliver out with the least damage to a tissue. A few minutes later, they had a broad sliver in their hands. "Withdrawn by the magnet. Later, Chamco brothers identified it with closer analysis as a piece of a battleplane skid strut, which has to be very strong and yet very, very light. Johnny had not been conscious enough to tell anyone what he had done on the throne, and Christie had chewed off the historian when he tried to find out earlier, so it had been a bit of a mystery as to how a sliver of a piece of a strut could have been daggered into Johnny's head. But whatever they had done to him, Chrissy was extremely relieved. The fever he had been and had and suffered had been dropping. His breathing improved and his colour was gotten better. But that means he was still white and not nigger, because that would be fucking evil. The following morning he came out to the coma and smiled a little at Chrissy and admired her breasts. McKendrick had dropped into the natural sleep. Planetary radio was not slow in cranking out the news. There Johnny was out of danger. The pipe major paraded through the pipes and old drums and all the compound, and they got chased out by the transfer spikes. It's fucking horrible noise. Bonfires blazed, both there and in various other parts of the world. A coordinator in the Andes relayed the news to the chiefs, and some peoples they had found there declared this an annual celebration day, and they could they come and pay homage to the straight white tall blonde man. A pilot standing by with a plane in the mountains of the moon in Africa had to get help from both coordinators and chiefs of that small colony in order to get a space to take off again. So mobbed had the field become with celebrating jubilant people. The compound radio operators had to double up on the shifts and handle all the message traffic rolling in on them as a result of the announcement. Robert the Fox, just went around grinning at everybody. But then he's wearing a miniskirt and he's old, so it's not surprising he's got a grin on. As the days wore into weeks, it became obvious to the council, originally composed of the parson, the schoolmaster, the historian, and the Lovat the Fox, and now augmented by several clan chiefs who had deputies in Scotland, that Johnny was brooding about something. He would smile at them from his bed and talk to them when spoken to, but there was something deep in his eyes that was dull and moody, even though they were very pretty and blue. Chrissy tried not to get them very close very often, and when they did get a bit too close and impatient, she would kick them out because they're nasty bastards. Some of the Russians and the Swedes were rebuilding the pass at the academy due to their desperate need for pilots, until the ancient capital building in Denver could be rebuilt. The council had a room in the academy. They could get into both the compound and the underground military base from there, and other birthing quarters were also there. At this particular... What the fuck am I doing different accents? At this particular meeting, Rob the Fox was walking up and down. Oh, walking up and down, that's right. Walking up and down, his kilt flaring out each time he turned, flashy bastard. His claymore, that's not what we call it down in England, held snug by the ancient officer's belt from the base, which also held a Smith & Wesson. It's Wesson, not Weston. Knocking against Charles. Something is bothering him. He is not like the old Johnny. Okay, I need to try and stick an accent and stick to it. Does you think we were doing something wrong, says the chief of Clan Fergus. No, it isn't that, says Robert the Fox. There's not a scrap of criticism for anybody in his makeup. It's just that he seems worried, see, doesn't he? The parson cleared his throat. It's just could be his side has something to do with it. He can't move much of his right arm, and he can't walk as yet. He is, after all, used to being about and very bristly as well. After all, the lad he's had a dreadful time of it. He was all alone and injured in that there drone. I can't think how he managed all that time. And all that time in the cage earlier, you would all expect too much, too fast, gentlemen. He's got a brave spirit, and I have faith. Could be worried over the possibilities of a solo counterattack, said the chief of Clan Girl. We must reassure him somehow, said the chief. Heaven knows we are working hard enough on planetary affairs. And they were. The World Federation for the Unification of the Human Race had been formed from those Johnny had not accepted for the group, and they had come with him to America. Some 200 young Scots and another 50 old Scots had done their beginning work well, in 2 dangerous but successful raids, one to the site of an ancient university named Oxford, and the other to a similar ruin at Cambridge. They had obtained language books and amount of material of other countries. They had worked out where isolated groups of humans might still be, and they had formed up a unit for each language they thought might still be in use. Their selection was proving not far off. The ruder bruised hands had attested to the diligence of their studying. Slap them bitch hands! They called themselves coordinators, and they were making a vital contribution all over the world, where groups had been found. The current estimate was there were nearly 35,000 human beings left on Earth, an astonishing number, that was for sure. The council agreed, and it was far too great for any one town. The groups were mostly survivors who had withdrawn to mountainous places, natural fortresses, their forebears had mined out, and in the case of the Rockies was a good example. But some were in the frozen north, in which the silos had had no interest, and some were simply overlooked strays. The duty of the council, as they saw it, was to preserve the tribal and local customs and government, and maybe install something over it in a clan system, appointing local leaders as clan chiefs. The coordinators spread the news, and they were extremely welcome and successful. The hard-working pilots were ferrying chiefs and visitors and simply anyone who got to their passenger place. If there were too many going or coming, they simply told them to wait until next week, and that would be fine. But there was no really organized forward motion. Local control of the tribes was often slack like a granny's fanny. Some of them retained literacy in their languages, but most had not. Most of them were poor, half-starved, and ragged. Ragged. The one incredible fact that after over 1,000 years, there was freedom from silos. I must stop this thing. Even as possibly temporary, united them in a wave of hope. They had once gazed. I'm not going gay. Fuck off, I'm doing gay voices. They had once gazed from the mountains on the ruins of their cities, and dared not visit. They had looked upon fertile plains in great herds, and they dared not benefit from them by murdering and eating their corpses. They had seen no hope whatever for their dying race. And then suddenly men from the sky, speaking in their language, telling them of the remarkable feats that led to possible freedom, had brought them soaring hope and bargaining pride in the race. The council's existence they accepted. They joined it and with radios packed on the rocks and in huts communicated with it. They all had one question. Was Sir Johnny McCullough, of whom the coordinator spoke of, a part of his council? Yes, he was. That was good. We have no more questions. But the council well knew that Johnny was not an active part of the council now, completely aside from the political significance of it. Every council member was himself personally concerned for Johnny's anus. There were all kinds of things happening all over the world, most of the actions taken without even informing the council. People were moving about, a group of South Americans with baggy pants, and to the rest of the world, that's baggy trousers. And flat, imagine with baggy underwear, just wrong. And flat leather hats. Oh, and that's what they used to wear in Yorkshire back in the 50s. With big rosettes and coloured scarves, they go to cheer their favourite stars. They all look forward to their Saturdays. There's one young lad walks down our street with bother boots upon his fleet and a never-saw cap. Oh, sorry, I got distracted with ancient music. Fuck did I go to? A group of South Americans with baggy knickers and flat leather caps, swinging wide lariats and riding almost as well as Johnny once did before he got a cripple, had suddenly walked off a plane with their women and their lariats and their saddles and said through their Spanish-speaking coordinators that they were Ilianos or Gachos, and that they knew cattle and had to get drunk, shag babies, and fall asleep in the middle of the day. But they would find out what to do with buffalo, and were taking over the management of the vast herds to preserve them and to make sure the people of the compound and the base were properly fed. 2 Italians from the Italian Alps had shown up, cupping their genitals, because that's what they do, and they'd taken over the commissary after making peace with the old women and beating out Gordon Ramsay, you Scottish bastard. 5 Germans from Switzerland turned up, and had shown up at a factory in Denver, because that's what Germans do, to salvage and service man equipment such as knives and tools. You name it, they fuck it. And if you sent it to them, they would make it all shiny and working and send it back. You mean they just polished it? This put a bit of a freight line into an already overburdened pilot zone. 3 Basques showed up and simply started making shoes. The difficulty was that Basque is a language that had been, no fucking knew what it was. It's a bit like Spanish. And the shoemakers were learning ancient silo while they were turning out shoes, and hides and South Americans dedicatedly furnished them with all the leather and all the shit needed to make shoes, and there's more people kept coming in. But Christy didn't mind. She was young. That was a joke. That was a joke. She's sweet and innocent, honestly. Although there's a reason why they called him Brown Limper. Everybody wanted to help and simply did. There is no control of it, said Robert the Fox in the hospital room. Johnny simply gave him a small smile. Why control them? The historian, except for Johnny's account of the drone, which was too sketchy to be called history, was getting bogged down in assembling tribal histories of the last 1,000 years or more. Coordinators sent him all kinds of stuff. He couldn't even keep it in order. Some serious-eyed Chinese from the mountain fastness there had shown up to help him, and they were furiously studying English, but were not of much help just yet. It seemed at first that language would be an obstacle, but it soon became clear that a future educated person would speak 3 languages. Silo, for technical matters, English for arts, humanities, and to be a civilized human fucking being, and their own tribal language, if it wasn't English. The pilots chattered siloed each other. All their equipment was in silo, as well as their manuals and navigation and related skills. There was a lot of protest at speaking the language of the hated silos, until the historian pointed out that silo, as a language, was really a composite of words and technical developments stolen from other peoples in the universes that would never had a real basic language that was called silo. People were glad of that, and thereafter learned and were willing to speak it, and all of a sudden they started referring to it as actual English as opposed to techno. The parson had his own problems. They had about 40 different religions, and he couldn't deal with it. They all want to kill babies. I'm sorry, that's just Jews, blacks, and Muslims, and yeah, most of them just want to kill babies. They had one thing in common: the myths of the conquest 1,000 or more years ago. Otherwise, they were miles apart. He had witch doctors and medicine men and priests, and such were flooding on his doorstep, and he knew very well the wars could develop out of a difference of faith. And he was not going to evangelize any of them. Man wanted a peace. Of peace. In peace. He explained to them that man, being divided and internally at war, had advanced too slowly as a culture and had been wide open to an invasion from elsewhere. They all agreed man should not be at war with man. The myths, well, now they knew the truth, such as it is, and they were happy to abandon those myths. That is bollocks. 1,000 years of legend, and you're going to abandon it because some faggot in a miniskirt turns up. I don't fucking think so. I don't care how shiny his horse. But on this question of which gods and which devils were valid, well, that's a wank for another day. The parson had neatly handled the whole thing for the moment. He would disturb no beliefs at all. Every one of those tribes was demanding to know what was the religion of Johnny Tyler. Well, he wasn't really part of any religion, the parson. He was just Johnny and McTyler. Instantly, and without any exception, Johnny McTyler became part of their religions. And that was that. But Johnny was lying a bit wan. A little bit wan. A little bit wan. Trying each day at Chrissy's and Dr. McKendrick's persuasion to try to walk, to use his arm, and when the parson tried to tell him that he was getting woven into the pantheon of about 40 different religions, he said fuck all. He just lay there, not much life or interest showing in the depth of his eyes. The council was not having a happy time of it. He lay half awake in his bed, not really wanting to try, but he had a wank anyway. The secret behind Johnny's lethargy was the feeling that he had failed. Maybe the bombs hadn't landed on Silo. Maybe all this was just a brief interlude of peace. Perhaps soon the beautiful plains of his planet would once more be denied the human race. And even if the bombs had landed and Silo was no longer a menace, he had heard of other races out there in the universe. Savage races, as pitiless as the Silos. How could this planet defend itself against those? It haunted him at every awakening. It plagued his sleep. People now looked so happy and industrious and perky, so relieved. What cruelty if it were just a brief interlude. How crushed they would be. Today would be just another day. He would get up. He had a Russian attendant would bring him in his breakfast and help Chrissy straighten out the room. Then McKendrick would come and they would walk and try to exercise his arm, but he would try to walk a little bit. Something about just there being there and there was nothing wrong. I mean, really, he was just having to learn to move his arm, move his leg again. Then Sir Robert, or it could have been the parson, they come over and they sit uncomfortably for a little while until Chrissy shooed them out. A few more dull routine actions, and another day would be gone. His failure oppressed him. He saw more clearly than they did how cruel a letdown this would be, especially with the anticipation of a Silo counterattack. He felt a little guilty, but then, that was just his pet name for Patty. He felt a little guilty, but he was glad, and he tried to put on a happy face. But then how soon this face might turn to grief. He had given the historian, Dr. McDermott, a colourless outline of the drone destruction, all from the viewpoint of what one could or could not do if another one should appear. And Dr. Mac, he was supposed to... There was more to the action than that, but he was chased out by Chrissy. Perk, buxom boobs bouncing as she chased him. Chrissy had just washed his face, and he was sitting at the trolley table when he noticed something odd going on with the Russian attendant. It really did not thoroughly challenge Johnny's interest, for there was always Scots guarding him outside the passage, and against intruder or disturbance, a guard he had at first protested and then accepted that they all seemed to be upset at the refusal. Johnny had not seen a particular Russian in 2 weeks. Others had been taking his place. Once this Russian had come in with a great big black eye and a triumphant grin on his face. After being questioned, Chrissy had explained that the Russians sometimes fought among themselves over the right to serve him. Wow, aren't they bitches? Well, this fellow looked like he could win any fight. He's as tall as Johnny, heavy-set with slightly slanted eyes, and dressed in baggy bottom trousers. Oh, what you call the Russians' guy trousers, not pants. And a white tunic, because that's the best colour on the planet. White is the best colour on the planet, even if the Jews are exterminating us and ethically cleansing all of us. Recently found out the National Health Service in England actually admitted to committing genocide against white people. If you do a search for NHS blood scandal, they actually admitted to knowingly infecting white people for 70 fucking years with blood infected with fatal contagious diseases and viruses like HIV, hepatitis, COVID jab, just to exterminate white people. That's why there's fuck all left in the country. There's not even a single white English GP left in England because we're all fucking dead. Anyhow, back to the story. Sorry about that, I got sidetracked. Blah, 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 blah. His bristling black moustache standing straight out on both sides of his big nose. His name was inevitably Ivan. After putting down Blackfoot, he had drawn back and was standing there at the stiffest attention Johnny had ever seen. But then he put his beavers away, and it was not quite so stiff. A coordinator came slipping into the door. It's Scott Century, scowling and privately vowing to send Sir Robert by running. I'm sorry, I must stop doing this fucking dodgy, rusty accent. A coordinator came slipping in the door. The Scots Sentry scowling and privately vowing to send for Sir Robert by runner, and the moment the door was closed, Johnny looked at the Russian questioningly. The Russian bowed from the hips and straightened up, looking stiffly ahead. How do you do, Johnny, sir? It was a very thick accent. Johnny went on eating oatmeal and cream, and how do you do? The Russian just stood there. Then his eyes lowered appealing at the Scot coordinator. That's all the English he knows, Johnny. Well, sir, he has some news, and he's got a present for you. Chrissy, with a broom in her hand and corn silk hat, so pretty and blonde and busty, tied out her eyes with a buckskin thong. Not where you wear a thong. Bristled at this violation of proper announcement. All of a sudden, she's fucking Queen of England. I'm sorry. I meant she's alive, not dead. She looked like she was going to hit both of them with the broom. Johnny motioned for her to be still. Damn bitch. He was slightly interested. The Russian was so imposing and was fairly bursting with what he had to say. Ivan barked off a long string of Russian, and the coordinator took it up. He says he is Colonel Ivan Smolsky of the Hindu Kush. That's in the Himalayan mountains. They are descended from the Red Army detachment that was cut off there and intermarried locally. There are about 10 groups in the Himalayas. They speak Russian, some of that an Afghanistan dialect, and they really aren't army units anymore, and colonel to them just means father. So they're really Cossacks. The Russian thought was going on far too long, and it was more than he had said, so he rattled off another string. The coordinator cleared up a couple of points, staring at Chrissy, and turned back to Johnny. This is all very irregular, says Chrissy. Her black eyes were flashing. This is the first time she's spoken in 5 fucking weeks. The coordinator was already in awe of Chrissy and her perkiness, and Johnny had to tell him to go on. It seems like when they found them, they could travel around the steppes, and these are huge. And a troop, that's what they call their family unit, is a troop. And they rode clear over the Uranal Mountains, and they got on a radio to him, and anybody can use a radio, it seems, and they gave him some news. Our coordinator there told him about this base, and that troop, for some reason, thought there might be a Russian base. They came back and radioed over in year about it, and he took off, and anybody could hook a ride on a plane, and they scheduled rounds of various tribes, about once a week. And he rode like the wind, he says, on their very swift horses, and he went to check it out personally. And he's come back, and he wants to tell you. He should tell the council, said Chrissy. Johnny is in no condition to be holding what they call audiences. The Russian let out another string, and the coordinator timidly translated. He did not like crossing Chrissy. She was a bitch with a whip. She was such a beautiful woman, and such a celebrity herself, and her boobs were awesome. There is such a base. It's as big as this one, and just as full of atom bombs and hardware and dead men. Johnny was vaguely interested. Might serve them as a refuge if there were a counterattack. Well, tell them that's fine, and why not clean it up and use it? A brief interchange between the coordinator and the Russian, and then fireworks. The Russian splattered off words all over the walls. He was speaking. Robert the Fox came in, short of breath, short of height, and short of a miniskirt. And he didn't want anybody disturbing Johnny. That was his job. But he paused. Johnny seemed interested. Not a lot, but he likes it. But more than Robert the Fox has seen for quite a while. The veteran leaned back against the wall and signaled for the coordinator to continue. The coordinator was getting overwhelmed. He was quite used to dealing with important tribal heads and notables, but here he was in the company of three of the most important names on this planet has ever had. Especially Johnny, sir. But Colonel Ivan was almost stomping his feet for him to translate. He says that's what ruined the whole human race. He says the valiant Red Army trying to fight the capitalist imperialist warmongers. They just names, Johnny. You don't mean nothing, mate. You got no political axe to grind. Had their attention on each other and didn't cooperate when an invader landed. And he says, well, tribal wars will and do happen. International wars among whole peoples are against the good welfare of the people. He says he is for the people of Earth, and that we didn't sit together but fought, and this must not happen again. He's very empathetic, Johnny, sir, and he says all the other Russian tribes are also. Johnny pushed back the tray, and the Russian, suddenly remembering his duty, picked it up and let out another broadside Russian. The coordinator pulled out some papers. They've retained their literacy, sir, and he and some of the chiefs drew out some papers. They don't have very much paper, and so excuse this condition, and I think they found it in that base, and they want your agreements on it. Johnny was starting to look a bit tired, and he looked to Robert the Fox. This is council business. The Himalayan chiefs are members of the council. The Russian seemed to divine what he was saying and rattled off more Ruskian. He says no. This council is over here on this continent, and that base is over there on that continent. And he says there are silos of nuclear weapons aimed at this continent. And they have been for 1,000 years or more. And he doesn't want anything to happen to you, Johnny. So, no. And he wants to force the South Americans and Alaskans, and he knows there are almost no North Americans left, to take charge of that base over there in your authority. He says that if Russians have charge of this base here, they won't fight Russia. And if peoples in this continent take charge of that base, then they won't fire this continent. Well, that's not bollocks. They've got all worked out, Johnny, sir. It's all here. They worked it all out in Russian. If you say so and put a little initial there, Robert the Fox was watching Johnny. This was the first thing he'd seen the lad take even the slightest interest in. Even the vaginal Chrissy didn't get attention. Patty's did a little bit, but not very much. He saw Johnny looking at him. He nodded. Johnny took the offered pen and wrote his initials on the paper. The Russian seemed to almost deflate with relief. Then he rattled away at the coordinator, who presently said, "He now has a present for you." Ivan put down the tray and reached into his tunic pocket. He brought out a gold disc with a big red star in the center, and there was 2 lapel tabs of an ancient braid. He gave them to Johnny, and he was waiting for them to accept them. The coordinator said, "That is the cap ornament they found in a marshal of the Red Army who was in charge of that base, and those are his lapel tabs. He wants you to know that's for you, and that you are in charge of both bases." Johnny smiled slightly, and the Russian promptly kissed him both cheeks. "You fucking bitch, you are Scottish," and rushed out. Robert the Fox, getting very jealous and slightly aroused, layered down his miniskirt. Chrissy put the gifts in Johnny's buckskin pouch. If this had happened 1,000 or so years ago, maybe things would have been different. Chrissy was shooing him to leave, and Johnny looked tired. The council will put this through and handle it. There might be vital materials in that base. "You might get it cleaned up and filtered," said Johnny. "It might help them if gas drugs do come again." When Dr. McKendrick came to exercise that arm and get him to walk, he told Johnny that you are improving. Johnny alarmed him. "Not improved enough. I may not have been quite so smart after all."